Ever worked with someone who just couldn't play fair? You know the type, the one who thinks your hard work is their personal cheat sheet. In my office, that person was Jason. Picture this: I'm grinding away, putting my heart and soul into a report, and out of the corner of my eye, I see him. Jason, casually strolling past my desk, but his eyes are locked onto my screen, like a hawk spotting its next meal. He wasn't just looking, he was memorizing. The next day, in the big team meeting, whose ideas would get all the praise? Jason's, of course. Except they weren't his. They were mine. He'd take my research, my notes, my carefully crafted strategies, and present them as if he'd pulled an all-nighter wrestling with the data himself. And our boss, he ate it up. He saw Jason as this rising star, this brilliant mind. Me? I was just the quiet one in the corner. But while the boss saw brilliance, I saw a fraud. A pathetic, lazy thief who couldn't come up with an original thought to save his life. I fumed silently for weeks. I complained to my work friends over lunch, who all just shrugged and said, "That's just Jason." But I knew I couldn't let it go on. It wasn't just about the credit. It was about respect. It was about my work, my effort, my career. I decided that if he wanted to play games, I'd create one he couldn't possibly win. So the plan began to form. It had to be subtle, it had to be clever, and most importantly, it had to expose him without making me look petty. I knew Jason's routine. He was predictable. His inspiration always struck right before a major deadline, and usually after a casual walk past my desk. The perfect opportunity was just around the corner, the quarterly performance review meeting. This was the big one, the meeting where major decisions were made. I spent a full week working on 2 separate reports. The first was the real one, locked away on a private drive, filled with accurate data, insightful analysis, and my best strategic recommendations. The second one was my masterpiece. It was a Trojan horse, disguised as a draft report. I named the file Q3_performance_analysis_draft_for_review. It looked completely legitimate. The charts were polished, the text was well written, but the core data was ever so slightly off. I changed key financial figures by just a few percentage points, tweaked sales projections downwards, and attributed market growth to the wrong campaigns. The errors were small enough that a quick glance wouldn't reveal them. But under any real scrutiny, the whole thing would collapse like a house of cards. This was the bait. And I knew Jason was a very, very hungry fish. The morning of the big meeting arrived. The air in the office was tense, as it always is before these reviews. I accidentally left a printed copy of my fake draft report sitting conspicuously on the edge of my desk, right next to my keyboard. I even highlighted a few of the incorrect numbers with a yellow marker to make it look like I was still working on it. Then I announced to my deskmate, loud enough for Jason to overhear, "I'm heading out for a long lunch, need to clear my head before the big presentation." It was the perfect setup. I walked out, not to the cafe, but to a coffee shop across the street with a direct view of our office windows. I sat there sipping my latte and watched. It didn't take long. Less than 10 minutes after I left, I saw Jason's shadow move towards my desk. He paused, looked around, then snatched the papers. He was back at his desk in seconds. The bait was taken. I finished my coffee, a slow smile spreading across my face. When I returned to the office an hour later, the fake report was back on my desk, exactly where I'd left it. But I could feel the smug energy radiating from Jason's cubicle. He was practically buzzing with confidence. He thought he had the ultimate ace up his sleeve. Little did he know, he was holding a losing hand. The meeting started at 3 p.m. The whole senior management team was there. The boss kicked things off, and then it was Jason's turn. He strutted to the front of the room with a confident swagger, a USB stick in his hand. "I've done a deep dive into our Q3 numbers," he began. "And I've identified some key trends we need to address immediately." He clicked and his first slide appeared on the giant screen, and there it was. My chart, my formatting, my words, and my beautifully, wonderfully incorrect numbers glowing for everyone to see. He went on for about 2 minutes, pointing to figures and explaining their implications. I just sat back and watched the show. At first, people were nodding along. But then, I saw our boss, a man who knows our numbers inside and out, start to frown. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen. He pulled out a calculator. The tapping of the keys was the only sound in the room besides Jason's confident droning. Finally, the boss held up a hand. "Hold on, Jason," he said, his voice sharp. "Stop right there. These numbers, they don't add up. The sales figures you're showing contradict the report from the finance department last week. Explain this." The confident smile melted from Jason's face. He stammered, well, I recrunched the numbers. Maybe there's a new data set?" He was flailing, desperately trying to find an excuse. The room was thick with an awkward silence. Everyone was looking at him, then at the screen, then back at him. This was my moment. After letting him squirm for what felt like an eternity, I slowly raised my hand. All eyes turned to me. I spoke calmly, my voice steady. "That's because this looks very similar to an unfinished draft I was working on." It was full of placeholder data I hadn't verified yet. I paused for effect, then looked directly at Jason. Maybe he can explain how he got a copy of my incomplete work? The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jason turned a shade of pale I'd never seen before. He couldn't say a word. The boss's eyes narrowed, connecting the dots in an instant. The meeting was abruptly ended. The next day, Jason was called into a meeting with HR. I heard he was fired by the end of the week for data theft and professional misconduct. Now his old desk sits empty. It is right across from my new one, the one with a better view and a nice little raise that came with my promotion. The moral of the story? Never underestimate the quiet people. They're patient, they're observant, and sometimes they're the ones writing your ending. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more.